Don't fall, Miss Tasha. Don't fall. All right. Everybody good?
Are we on?
Yeah, we're on.
Are we
We're
on?
Do you think Tasha would fall when we're not
I
on?
have no idea. But you just crushed that daggum laptop over there.
Well, that's true. That's true. All right, guys. Welcome to Tuesday Morning Coffee. Brad here. Appreciate y'all being with us. I got my main man, Tony.
Hey.
The first thing that I want to say is that I appreciate all of the cards, the texts, the emails. Had a couple carrier pigeons here from New York that came in that were concerned. Yeah, that were concerned that I've been gone for a couple of weeks.
That's right.
And so in the past 2 weeks, we have saved the rainforest and we've solved global warming.
Love.
And then I also went on a beach trip with my family for my birthday.
Which is global warming.
Yeah, correct. So one of those three is correct, and you can ascertain which of those three is correct. But appreciate y'all being with us. Today we're going to be talking about inheritance situations. We're moving forward in the series of the Big Five Motivators and really figuring out where most of our transactions come from, the anomalies and the nuances between the Big Five, comparing and contrasting motivations, and figuring out how we can best navigate these kinds of situations so that we can buy more houses and really serve people in a better way. Okay, before we get to that, I want to go over really two deals of the day. One of them's mine, one of them's Tony's. For me, Tasha sent me a text message on my birthday and said, "What are you doing for your birthday?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to buy a house."
That's right.
And so,
and you were at the beach, right?
Yeah, we were at the beach, and James was down there with us. James does most of our purchasing. And so about 4 o'clock, we didn't have a house yet. I'm like, "James, where's the house?" You know, he said, "Well, I'm working on some things. Just hang in there." And so ended up, we bought a house. I say house, maybe I didn't buy a house. I actually bought a single wide that had been added onto. So I bought a dwelling. It's not really a house.
Yeah.
But
well, house, single wide, we buy equity.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter, does it?
No.
What matters is the
Absolutely
deal.
Not. So bought it for $38K. I believe it's $5K down and payments per month at 0%. So it's principal only payments on the 38. And then we're going to sell it under finance for probably 110, 120, something like that. So we have ballpark a $70K equity position in that in paper, in note. And it'll be a nice little, a great cash flow deal. And a note that in 6 or 7 years, whenever that seller is paid off, I've got a free and clear note, just like a bank would have.
Yeah.
And I'll have really no money in it because whatever our down payment is to our seller, we'll get back whenever we owner finance it. So, and this is the kind of deal that I would do.
That's right.
You know, from 2010 to 2014.
That's right.
100% is what I did, was creating notes. So it's just kind of like homecoming. On my birthday, we're doing another.
That is deal. Fun. I like them so much.
So that's a nice little segue. Tell everybody about what you got going.
Yeah, it would have kind of been cool if your deal of the day had been the purchase of this small cabin out in Holiday, Tennessee, which you later sold to a workmate, you know, and hopefully made just a little bit. And then I'd told the second half of it, which is I bought this house from this guy.
Yeah.
So it is kind of a weird deal. Brad bought a house. It's a cabin right on the Tennessee River, about an hour and 20 minutes west of Nashville, off of I-40. And I think he paid $35,000 for it.
I think so.
And a gentleman wanted to sell it. He actually built the house by himself from scratch. He's just a phenomenal craftsman. Great guy.
It was done well. I mean, most of the time, whenever we see something, it's like, oh, I did it all myself. We're thinking, oh, Lord. But this was done well.
But it was sketchy, you know, its location.
Yeah.
It's in a community that's not very, it was going to hold down the values on the resale. Anyway, I wound up buying that house from Brad, and out of his kindness and the last 5 birthdays of mine, which he didn't get me shit. He sold me hey, can we clip out the, maybe? Okay. Anyway, he sold me that house for nothing, just whatever he had in it.
I just gave it to him.
I
lost $35K.
That's
free house. No, I gave it to him at cost.
Yeah. And so he'd had holding costs in it. So I actually paid $50 for it. So I went to my one of my lenders and I got $50,000 paid Brad off, and so I was in it for that. Put it on the market for 119, didn't touch it, 119.9, and had an offer for 105, and I said I'll take it, but I'm not touching anything. And so they went ahead and had an inspection done on it. Did find a couple of things that I was going to have to address down the road, because an appraiser would have picked it up as well. And so wound up not wanting to address those things. In the meantime, the gentleman that you originally bought the house from, he also owned a lot right across the street, and had gone across the street and is halfway through building a small house there, a tiny house there.
Okay.
He calls me and says, would you sell the house back to me? And I said, hey, I can't do that. I can't do that. I've got to make some money off of it. He said, oh, I'm fine with you making money off of it. Could you owner finance the house to me? And this guy's got some money. He has some automatic money coming in every month from pensions and a retirement and some disability, that kind of stuff.
So a pretty safe note.
Yeah. So I wound up taking it off the market. I sold it to him for the 119.9. I took his lot across the street in the tiny house that is about halfway finished as a $20,000 down payment. And I have a $100,000 note. I moved the 50 that I had borrowed over to another property I have that's got a lot of equity in it.
Yeah, that's retailing out.
That's retailing out.
Yeah.
So freed that up, and now I've got a $100,000 note at 9.9% interest for the next 30 years, and it is going to be a great long-term note for me.
Perfect. Yeah, that's really nice. So, and the second wrinkle to this is, how much is it going to take you to finish that other lot?
Okay, so that lot actually is twice the size of the lot across the street that he just bought. And so I'm going to cut that lot in half into 2 lots. And then I may or may not leave that tiny house on it. Okay. I may move that to a nicer area because it's going to be easy to move right now. But I can owner finance both of those lots now for probably $35,000, $40,000 a piece.
Okay. So
I'll pick up another 70, $75,000 in a couple of notes there too.
Yeah. So total will create roughly 120,000 in equity on this deal.
Yeah.
That is in a small town, not a super interesting property.
Right.
But the numbers worked, and you saw the ability to be creative with this person.
Right.
And accept property as a down payment. And guys, like, we've had that happen. We've had people give us free and clear properties before as a down payment.
Right.
And those are some of our better deals. Like,
yes.
That's how we ended up with a deal in Michigan. Was it?
Oh, Manton,
Michigan. Yeah.
That's right.
And had a squatter in there. That was a whole other situation. But really, really nice stuff, man. Really
yeah.
good.
I mean, you just have to be open. I learned all this in our program.
Yeah.
I mean, then it wasn't a program. It was just.
Yeah. You really were the first apprentice.
Yeah. Just you showing me how to do some of this stuff, and watching you kind of. And David, the creativity that David Alexander has is through the roof, and it's just like, well, why don't you do this and this? And I don't get it when he's saying it at our masterminds at first.
Right.
But then, I try to draw it out on a piece of paper, and then you go, man, that is genius.
It really is. And I will say it's easier to create a note portfolio than what people really imagine. Mm-hmm. So I think that people think, oh man, I think the biggest misconception about what we do creating notes is that you have to have money to create a note.
Right.
Like, oh, I've got $100K cash, I'm going to trade that for a $100K note.
Right.
That's the dumbest thing ever. Mm-hmm. And that still works because Bank of America and Wells Fargo and all these companies, they're happy to trade that cash for that note because they know that the interest is coming and you can't outrun the interest. Yeah.
So basically, I got the lot across the street for free.
Yeah.
Basically. And so I cut it into 2 lots, and I've got the one here and those. I'm at 0 in on when I start, and I'm going to wind up with 3 notes there for about $170,000 in note at 9.9% interest. But when you think about that long term, what that does, it is phenomenal what that spins off. And I guess the one thing on that I want to say to younger investors who tend to, at the time, not all the way, not all the time, but tend to sometimes only think about what they can get a chunk of cash for immediately to make some type of purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where else are you going to get 9.9% on an investment you have long term?
Fixed, secured by undervalued real estate.
Yes. So you need to start stacking these up, and you won't have to worry about retirement down the road.
Yeah.
You're going to be set as these spin off cash for you.
You know, that's an interesting thought. I remember specifically maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I realized that my retirement's taken care of. You know, that it wasn't a concern for me to how am I going to retire? It's like, that's set. The notes are there. Some of them are paying down to where they're going to be free and clear by that point. And, you know, we've got a handful of rentals and that kind of thing. It's like, okay, we just have to get there.
You know, I bet you the first 5 years I worked for you, I bet you 65 to 70% of the deals we did were all notes.
Owner finance. Yeah.
And the only reason we came out of that was because values went so high,
right,
that you could capture more with we still bought the same.
Yeah.
It's just that values went so high, we could capture more quicker. But, you know, people are concerned about, you know, the interest rates going up and what's going to happen to values. And that really doesn't affect us at all, because what we do that makes this work is how we buy. It's not what the market's saying it's going to sell like.
I think overall it would be a big benefit to us to go back into a 2010, 11, 12 scenario, because our ability to buy goes up. We can buy creatively. We know exactly what that looks like. And then we can hold more assets. Like, make no mistake, guys, like, it's not the cash pops that retire you. The cash pops are important. I believe in a holistic system. Like, we don't want to create a business that only does one thing. We don't want to only owner finance. We don't want to only flip and go retail. We don't want to only do rentals. But it's kind of like, I guess we're kind of like the CrossFit of real estate. You know what I mean? It's like, we don't want to be just a good runner. We don't want to be just a good swimmer. Like, we want to be good at everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because of that, you have a holistic system and thought process that creates more equity all the way around. Because if you're creating cash pops through retail deals, you can increase your ad budget. And then if you increase your ad budget, you have more leads to create owner finance deals.
Yes.
And if you have more stability in the business because of owner finance deals, you can be a little bit more risky in terms of what you're willing to take down to go retail, because your base is solid. So the whole system, it all feeds into one another. You know, I don't believe in doing just one despite the other.
Right. It's good stuff. I am going to try the CrossFit thing on Kara when I get home. Honey, Brad said today that I am the CrossFit of real estate, and which I don't think she's going to think I look any better.
Well, you got compared to Jason
Momoa.
I think that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it was real dark in the room. It's not a lot of light when the lady said that.
Now, who is that guy anyway? I don't keep up with these things.
Oh, he's Aquaman, right? Yeah, he's Aquaman.
Christina over here acting like she does.
Yeah. He's my height, and that's about where it ends.
Okay. Well, hey, I'm not your height, so what the hell do I have?
Well, this guy's supposedly one of the most beautiful men on the planet, and I'm down in the 30s on that ranking. So
I don't know if I'd want to be beautiful. I think I'd stick with handsome.
Handsome. Yeah, call it what you want to. I don't care.
Right on. Cool. All right, we've gone way off in left field. So meanwhile, back at the ranch, we're going to be talking about inheritance situations. Okay. All right. Oh man, you know, before we started here, we talked about how we're going to have to start putting some Baileys in the coffee. I don't know if Miss Christina or Tasha hasn't put something in.
I know it.
In here over here, but
it's the wrong B word.
Yeah,
bourbon in mine, I think.
Something. All right, cool. We're going to be talking about inheritance situations. So let's go through the emotions that are that really correspond with inheritance. Okay. And what I want to submit to you is that there's two main emotions that are involved in inheritance situations. And it's kind of funny because they're predicated specifically on, like, what was the relationship like when the person passed?
Yeah.
Okay. Because if you have a really, really close relationship, undoubtedly the emotion is grief. But a lot of times, what we see, the emotion is a different G word called greed.
Yeah.
So we're not in a position where you have someone that's really emotional about the situation outside of getting as much as they can. And I remember, I used to work for a builder developer in college, selling his new construction. And I remember specifically, he told me one time about how when his grandfather passed away, they all thought that there was money in the house. And so the family goes to the house, they have a reading of the will inside the house. And people were disappointed that there wasn't like cash that was being
hidden.
And so somebody said, I always thought that he had a hiding place here. And they all run to one side of the house and they're looking.
Oh my God.
And then somebody said, well, I had an idea about this room over here. And then they're all running over to that room. And it's like cockroaches running all over the house, trying to find a dollar bill. And it's really terrible. But we've run into both, I would say, in our situation, but in our career. But I think that we've dealt with more grief than we have grief.
I'd say so. A lot of sadness, I mean, when someone, and now it's not like it was 50 years ago when most people would be born and raised and live and die in the same community.
Right.
So people spread out now. They're somewhere else. So they're away from their loved one. And so there's not only grief and sadness, but then there's like guilt because they weren't close to them. I mean, I lived 2.5 hours from my mother, and you have to, it's a regular routine to go visit, but it's not like if you lived close and you could go over in the afternoon and see them, that kind of thing.
Right.
So yeah, grief, sadness, guilt, lots of things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about what the house means to the person that is dealing with an inheritance situation. And keep in mind that whenever you have lead flow coming in from an inheritance, it could be any of the heirs, it could be an heir's spouse, it could be the actual executor that you're dealing with in a probate situation. We'll talk about probate in just a minute. But, and I guess I'll talk about this in terms of like what I dealt with. So I was raised by my grandparents. My papa passed when I was 14. And my grandmother passed, I guess it's been 5 years now. And me and my grandmother were just like super, super close, super close. She was an amazing lady. The first time she met Tony, what did she say?
She looked up in the air because she was a little bitty lady. She looked up there and she said, well, hello, big fella. She was so sweet.
Yeah. But so she passed, and I was really lucky that she didn't have a really tough passing. From the time she fell May 1st, we took her to the hospital. She was in the hospital for a while. Her potassium was really low, and I thought that was like a really strange thing, but apparently that's like a big deal. So she was in intensive care for a while and got out of intensive care. We put her into a rehab facility because she had to learn how to do some walking and do some rehab stuff. And she fell and broke her hip there.
Yeah.
And I remember that was on my birthday 5 years ago because I got the call. And she passed a couple weeks later.
Yeah.
And whenever she fell May 1st, I knew she was sick, but I had no idea what was coming. I thought, she was 83 at the time. Right. She passed when she was 84. But I never would have thought that it would happen that fast to someone that literally middle of April was out mowing the grass.
Yeah. Very active.
Yeah,
very strong,
very active.
Very active. Tough lady, yeah.
Tough lady. And so it happened really fast, but the last 3 days, I knew she was going to pass. And so we brought her from the rehab facility home because I promised her that that I would do my best to get her home.
Yeah, that's where she wanted to be.
Yeah. And so, we had a lot of family come over and everything, and she passed. We went through the funeral services and all that. And then we had the will, and I had inherited that house. I'd grown up there. But then it's like, well, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
because, and I'm a real estate guy. Like, I'm not very emotional about property. And, I'd grown up there and I had just so many great memories there. But then 3 days of just a really tough time really overshadowed 30 years of good times, But I'd grown up in that house from the time I was 18 months old. They'd taken me in until basically, I got married, So I had a few options. I could sell the house, but then I thought, I may want it back. That might be a wrong decision. I don't want to make an emotional decision. And I said, well, I can rent it, but we've dealt with tenants all of our career.
Yeah, and you weren't ready for other people to be walking around the house anyway.
Well, that, and then, these are my prized grandmother's cabinets.
Yeah.
That literally she put on credit and had to pay off working nights.
Right.
And there's a story behind
now
that.
just think about what you just said there. I mean, they're just cabinets.
Yeah,
but
correct.
then they're my grandmother's cabinets.
Right.
But then she bought them on credit, and I mean, there's stories behind stories behind stories.
So I wasn't really ready for a tenant to go in and destroy the place because I knew that emotionally that would be tougher for me than probably selling it.
Mm-hmm.
But then holding it, it's like the worst thing for a house to just leave it vacant.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is, but you'll have a house that can last 200-300 years, no problem, if people are there.
Mm-hmm.
But you leave one vacant for 5 years, it just starts to fall in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why that is. Like there's something to that, but finally I did what we've had other people do. I sold it to an investor at a discount. And the reason that I did that is Stefan, which me and Stefan, Stefan's a great friend of Tony's. He's a builder. And we sold him some lots a few times, whenever we had land deals.
He's as honorable a man as I know.
And I like the idea of it being basically a friend that has this property now.
Right.
And we also worked out that if I want it back, that he would sell it back to me. And so for me, it was having the ability to have that option in the future in case I decide, hey, I really made a mistake there. Like I really want this house back. Made me feel a lot better moving forward. I knew that he would maintain it well and all of that. So that's what I decided to do, and I'm really happy with the decision. And every once in a while, I'll drive by there, and it's become a happy place again.
Yeah,
because I see people there. He's fixed it up. He's done well with it.
Yeah, he rehabbed it.
Yeah, and so I was okay with that decision. But I thought it was interesting that I became the person that we often buy from.
Right.
And at this point, I have no idea how many hundreds and hundreds of houses we've done, but to become the person that we buy from gave me a lot of insight into like really the value that we provide. So I felt really good about that. But at the end of the day, the house for me being, frankly, just heartbroken over this. And you remember how tough it was for me. But the house became something that I didn't know what to do with because I wanted to be a good steward of what I'd been given. But at the same time, it seemed like there was no good option.
Yeah, I mean, Graham would have had, if she'd have thought through that part of it, she'd have written in the notes, I want this house sold within 3 months, 90 days. Because she would wanted you to have whatever is going to come from it. I mean, we all feel that way about you, feel that way about your kids.
Yeah.
But they're not going to feel that way about you. It's going to, the home, the whatever there is, it's going to have all these memories tied into it.
Right.
All these emotions. So whether it's a house or something else, but specifically, that's the biggest thing that we have in life as we're growing up is this home we live in. So it was difficult. It was hard for you. It's the same way for a lot of these folks that we buy houses from. And so you basically, it's the exact same script. It's the exact same process, but with a little more patience and a little more empathy. And now you're going to have some folks come along and like some of the ones we've had and there's no love loss.
Yeah, that's right.
There.
Like Ricky Knutson was one.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, I'm out.
Yeah. So let's talk about some situations that we see with probate, because we've run into some extremely tragic situations with probate. The one that comes to mind for me, we had a lady call. She was an older lady, maybe, I mean, not older, but I'd say late 60s, early 70s. And she said that her daughter had passed away. And I remember we met her at like a fast food place or something to talk to her, and she just crying, you know. We went to take a look at the house, and for some reason she wasn't there, but there were some teenage boys that let us in.
Oh yeah, this is Hermitage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so going through the house, we noticed that the carpet was pulled up in the master.
Yeah.
And we found out later that the lady's daughter was murdered in that bedroom, and her husband had murdered her and committed suicide. So the boys that had let us in had lost their mother.
Yeah.
And you know, the lady that we were talking to had lost her daughter via murder, and just how tragic of a situation that was. And ended up, we couldn't do anything. We had contracted to buy it, but the title was messed up.
Right.
You know, and she needed the money to be able to provide for these children that she had now.
They were now her grandchildren.
Yeah, her grandchildren that she was now having to take care of. And I don't think she was a poor lady, but I think the money would have helped.
Oh, no doubt.
You know,
no doubt. I mean, and that is that. It's Tulip Grove over in Hermitage, and that is a real nice middle class neighborhood. So I doubt she had a bunch of money and set up in savings somewhere.
Right. Right. So we ran into that. We bought a house one time in Little Rock, Arkansas, where the sister had inherited the property from her father. Her brother had murdered her father outside with a brick. You know, and that was a tougher situation, you know.
Then we have Greenville, which the adult children live way out of town. Didn't realize the shape that the parents had gotten in. And by the time the last one passed away and they showed up, they realized that they'd become hoarders. And that there was a massive hole, probably, 3 feet in diameter, in the kitchen ceiling where a tree had fallen in, and it just rained in there continually. And they'd gotten a kiddie pool and set it up in the kitchen floor to catch the water.
Yeah.
By the time we got there, it was full of tadpoles. Frogs were all in the house, dead animals. But I mean, you could barely walk through that house. And that was an inheritance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they felt a lot of shame over their parents living that way.
Yeah, and the neighbors did as well. The neighbors had not a clue because they never came outside.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and there's no contingency for these things. You know, like we have really strong script work, but I don't have great script work on how do you respond to someone that says, you know, my daughter was murdered. You know, like all you can do is feel for those people and let them talk and try to do the best you can to help them. Like at that point, it's not even about the house. Like we don't really care about buying another house, but it's like, look, how can we support you? Like, you know, and Tony has spent many like hours with people talking about you need to get involved with a counselor. You know, do you have resources? You know, have you talked to anybody? And I just, it's not about the house at that point.
You're going to have plenty of opportunities to buy.
Yeah.
Through the other 4 that we focus on buying from. You got plenty of opportunities. If you get this house and you're able to help these people, that's great. If helping these people means you don't get this house, that's fine too.
Yeah, that's right.
On these. So, but you said something that's really the key. A lot of times we're on the phone with somebody like that. You're gonna need to let them talk a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Than any of the others. Doesn't matter whether it's got anything to do with the house or not. You're just gonna have to listen to some rambling. You're gonna have to listen to some stories, and be patient.
Yeah. Now you kind of had a fun one in Alexandria.
Yeah, that one. That was an interesting one. This guy called wanted to say. Actually, well, we can talk about that part of it another time. So the way it came in was the guy who'd been living in it for some time. His mother had left the house to him. So once we got into the title, Judy over at Southern Land, little shout out to Judy, Southern Land Title and Escrow in Nolensville. We found out that she had been left the house from her husband, but he had had a previous marriage, and he had 6 children.
Mm.
So the way the whole thing turned out, because the will was not done correctly, it turned out that his 6 children, that they co-owned 50% of the house each, her and her husband.
Okay.
His 6 children owned his 50%.
So each of them had 8% of it.
And she owned, of her 50%, she owned a child's portion as well. Now it was just this guy and 2 of his sisters. So the 2 sisters both signed immediately quitclaim deeds over to him. They didn't want the house.
So you had 8 people that you had to get deeds.
That's
from.
exactly right.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had to find somebody, 2 people, to sign affidavits of heirship that said that all these people are actually from the same family. Well, the problem is the man that the lady married was a lot older than him, so his kids were a lot older, and none of the kids on her side, those 3, had even never met these 6.
Oh, wow.
So they had no idea where these 6 lived. So Judy found them all, and so one was in Cincinnati. I had to drive to Cincinnati, Ohio, and get a quitclaim deed from her. I had to drive to Harlan, Kentucky. If you've never been to, that's coal mining country in eastern Kentucky. And there's a song out about Harlan that the sun comes up at 10 every morning and goes down at 3 every day. And it's because the main road into Harlan, the mountains go straight up, so you can't see the sun till about 10. And it goes over this mountain on this side about 3. And there was one notary in the entire county, and that was at the courthouse. And I had to go to this lady's house, pick her up, take her to the courthouse. She signed, take her back home, and then come back. And then the one that was the best one, he was in the Vidalia County, Georgia jail. And I called down there, and they said, yep, we got him here. And I said, well, I'm going to come see him tomorrow. And they said, all right, come on. Well, I drove 8 hours. It's right outside of Savannah, Georgia. I drove 8 hours down there, get there, and they said, sir, we didn't have your number. We don't have to tell you this. But somebody came in last night, confessed to the crime he's in jail for. And they released him first thing this morning. And I'm like, I got to have him.
Yeah.
Well, the sheriff saw me going out to my truck and hollered at me and said, come on in here. I don't know where he is. But his boy can't stand him. And he lives right here. And here's his phone number. And
His son.
His son.
Okay.
So I called his son. His son, I can't say some of the stuff he called him here on, but he said, yeah, I know where he went. He's already sent me a message today on Facebook. And he gave me his phone number. So, no, he didn't have a phone number yet. He gave me his name. So I looked him up on Facebook, sent him a private message, and I had to promise him a little money. So he responded. And on that one, I didn't go to Texas. I sent it to him, and they only had one notary, and that was at the sheriff's department. And he said to me, I don't tell you how much I need some money right now. I don't go near sheriff's departments. And so, I mean, we got it all straightened out, and these things are not easy either. A lot of these inheritance things are not easy. You got to be patient. It's worth it. Sometimes people just go, forget it. If I've got to work this hard, well, being on the phone is not hard work. And when you're going to make $75,000 to $150,000 on a house, and you had to put in 30 hours on it,
Right.
That's less than a week to make that kind of money.
So I think that this is kind of amazing. So how do you get in? So what does a conversation look like whenever you're reaching out to someone cold that's an heir, an 8% heir to a property? Like, how do you navigate that?
So on those, because none of those even know where each other lives anymore. They're all in their 60s. They live all over the place. They hadn't talked to their brothers and sisters in forever. So I couldn't cut a deal with all of them.
Yeah.
So I had to go through basically the script, a section of the script. Is that, you know, and I start out with, I'm not going to give him any money. I just need you to sign this, you know, so it'll release you from any responsibility with this house. Mm-hmm. And so 3 of them signed just with that. And 3 of them felt like they needed a little money.
Okay.
And so, and I had to negotiate them separately, each one when I was on the phone with them. I mean, you just have to take your time and be persistent and move through it and not let your emotions get into it.
Now, was anybody unreasonable about what they wanted on the front end?
I think a couple of them took $500 each. The old boy just got out of jail, took $1,800.
$1,800. Okay. Interesting.
It's like he had a script on the other end of the phone. He's like, "Is that the most you can give?"
That's funny. Sometimes they try to flip it on us like that. So, interesting. So, guys, anytime we're dealing with probate, you have to identify, like, who do you have on the phone? You know, do you have an heir? Do you have a spouse to an heir? Do you have someone that thinks they should be an heir? We've run into that. Well, I should have been an heir. I was promised this. It's like, well, what does the paperwork say?
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people will claim that they were promised something that they were never promised. And so you have to identify who you have and who is the actual decision maker. Yeah,
because sometimes the person who's reached out to you and is trying to sell the house doesn't have the authority to do it.
Correct.
And so, this is where a good title company comes into play, who knows how to look things up, knows how to do good discovery.
Yeah.
And they can come back and tell you, look, that person is an heir, but not the decision maker.
Yeah.
The house was left to this person.
Now, guys, one thing that I want to say here, it's really important that if you feel like you have an heir, even though they may not be the total decision maker, if the deal makes sense, paper it.
Yep.
Because it's risk versus reward.
That's right.
The risk there is extremely low. I mean, you have a little bit of time and, a little bit of effort into the deal, but the risk is like, well, you don't have every heir, but you're a step closer to having that by just having that first person under contract.
That's right.
And we've had many, many deals where we didn't have everyone all at the same time.
Right.
But then they started shopping the deal to everyone else, talking them into it.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing. So, like, if you have one heir or you have one executor, it's a lot easier to deal with than if you're dealing with 4, 5, 6 people at a time, So, and what you did, I think, was really, really specifically good. It's not good that they didn't have a relationship with the other people, but you didn't have 8 people trying to agree on one thing. You had 8 people that had to agree for themselves, And so with that, I know whenever we go to lunch here at the office every Friday, we can't agree on where to have lunch, much less how much we should receive from an inheritance on a piece of real estate, that we may think is worth, $5 million more than what it is, So just keep that in mind. Also, dealing with probate in most states, you don't have to go through the probate process. So, like, specifically like Tennessee, where we are, where most of our transactions are, probably not even half now, but maybe 30-40% of our transactions are in Tennessee. If we have an inheritance situation where probate has not been opened, then we can pass title and insure title through affidavits of heirship. So affidavits of heirship, it's an affidavit that says it's a non-family member that has known the family for an extended amount of time. And I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 you have to get.
You have to have 2.
2. So you get 2 affidavits. So I remember on Latta Street in Chat, we had the barber.
That's right.
That did it.
Now, it can also be a husband and wife team that both know.
Okay.
Yeah, you can find a couple that both know, and each of them can sign a separate affidavit.
Interesting. And so the affidavit.
But we did have the barber sign it.
Yeah, later. I remember, because they're like, we don't have anybody, and I think it was your idea. Well, who cut your hair?
That's right. I forgot about that.
And so then we go to the barber, and I don't know if you look like you needed it. You might have even gotten a haircut just to get this done. I don't know. But I know you're awful picky about your hair. So I know that's true.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you get the affidavit done. The affidavit basically says, I've known the family for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
These are the heirs that Mr. Jones, who is deceased, had. And so with those, they will transfer title from the person on record to the heir and insure that. and that's the main thing, is we want to have title insurance on that in case another heir pops up, which we've had that happen too. And then we have an insured title at that point. But if we can do it outside of probate, we don't want to take it to probate.
So what if it's already in probate?
Then it's going to be a state issue as to whether you can or not. At that point, generally the judge is going to be the one that has to sign off, or the executor can, if there's an executive. But it's a lot tougher, because then we're dealing with situations where, like if it's in probate, it's tough to buy sub 2, because the probate court doesn't want to leave the debt outstanding. Whereas if it's passed outside of probate, it's a non-issue. Like that's kind of an example of, anytime you get the court systems involved in something, it's probably not going to be as streamlined of a process, let's say. So we just want to stay out from under that if we can. But everybody thinks that you have to go to probate to transfer real estate. It's not the case. It's not the case. So keep that in mind. If you're in a state that you don't know this process, it's a good process to understand and learn, because you'll be able to do deals where we've literally had other investors look at deals and say, well, you're not through probate, we can't do this. And they come to us and say, we're like, yeah, no problem. Actually, don't open probate. We don't want you to, and then we buy a house. So what do you think is the least understood part of inheritance, whether it's from an emotional perspective that the seller's dealing with, or the process, or maybe a mistake that people make that you see?
I think a lot of times people assume that they need to rush to find someone legal. They need to involve attorneys. They need to right away, which they don't have to do right away. They can sell the house before it goes into probate. They can, but it's just a part of it that we don't know. I think we usually rush to attorneys on a lot of things before we have to. I think we're pretty ignorant about, and I don't mean that ugly, I just mean I think we just don't know what we don't know about a lot of things when it comes to property passing from one to another. I think probably people also don't, at that point, they've been handed an asset, a generational asset, hopefully. It's an asset. And I think probably they don't know the best way to maximize that asset either. The asset, I think they don't know the best way to capitalize on it. I mean, when somebody leaves you money, when they leave you money, they leave it to you to do something with. When they leave you a house, they're leaving you cash unless you're going to go live in it. So what is the best way to maximize that?
Right. That makes sense. Final thought for me, I feel like the biggest thing that I see that people make mistake with on this is, before going to the contract, is wanting to know everything about probate and making sure that they have all the heirs and that everything's good. Like, all of that is post contract. Like, figuring out title, heirs, all of that is important to know pre-closing, but it's post contract. So just keep that in mind.
I think that's true for all 5 of them we do.
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
we find people who are just like, well, how should I do this now? Now we're having, and they're in their 3rd conversation with somebody, and we're having to say, paper that.
Yeah.
Put it under contract while you're having these conversations. You can get out, but once you leave this thing alone too long, there's going to be 2 or 3 yous looking at this thing. And then somebody else is going to get in there.
Yeah, we just had a deal a couple days ago that somebody didn't move on fast enough because they wanted to know everything. And I told this guy specifically on one of the support clinics, like, it's time to go to paper. And if I feel like they're not going to do it, then I'll tell them, and you have to take a selfie whenever you get the deal and post it. It's like a little bit of extra accountability.
Yeah.
But and last final thought for me, guys, if you don't have your estate documents in order, get that done. It's not that expensive to do. And one of the things that I'm so thankful for is, whenever my grandmother got sick, I called the attorney and he sent everything over to me. And there was a living will, which dictates like at what point end of life decisions are made. It wasn't even my decision to make, but it was my responsibility to carry out those wishes. And so I had a lot of information there about understanding what final wishes were. So those kinds of things, guys, like if you don't have those, get that stuff done. And I'm not a details person, you know what I mean? But that detail, like, we definitely have done, because I've been the recipient of the value that someone else took the time to put in place a really good plan for me to implement. Okay. Guys, that's about it for us today. Appreciate y'all being with us. Tuesday Morning Coffee. We'll see you guys next week. Appreciate y'all being with us.